Okay, so I'll do an example with the low as well. So basically, the low plus the high, 50% each side equals 100%. So full possible range is 127 steps. I've got the low set to 50, so my negative range can now go down 50% of that. So I'm starting at 64, I can go down at full 64 to 0, or I'm starting at 64 and my high is at 50%, so I can go up a full 64 to 127. Now let's try, so if I set this high at 25%, so a quarter, now it's not going to be 64. I'm going to start at 64. Sorry, the base is at 50%, so 50% of 127. I'm starting off, when I first put my finger on here, I'm starting off at 64. Now the high range is 25% of the full possible range, which is 127, so that's going to be about 32. So I'm going to start at 64. As I move my finger up, the highest point it's ever going to reach, even when I move full along here, is going to be 64 plus 32, so that's going to be, 96. So I just...
Glad you're good at maths.
I never was before. Okay, so let's just double check that. Hopefully, please ask questions if I'm not explaining this amazingly. So I'm starting off at 64. I'm moving my hand along. It might be better to go full screen.
Oh, what's full screen?
Oh, the other full screen. Oh, yeah.
That.
So I'm getting to the very top. And it only when I get to the very top that it reaches 96. So there, as we go. So the high is 25%. Now if I put the high at 0, it means there is no positive range above the base. So what that will mean now is when I press the strip controller, I start off at 64, but I can't go above that. There is no range above that, but I can still go down. I've got 50% range downwards. So 50% of 127 is 64, so I can go all the way along the strip controller and it will reach 0 for me. Okay, so does that make sense, do you think? You're not sure?
I'm sure it makes sense.
Okay, cool. So
no questions so far.
Okay, that's good. So just to recap then, so the base is the resting position, and that is a percentage of the full possible range, which in MIDI terms, and because I've got the scale factor to 1, full possible range is 127. So the base point is a percentage of that. In this case, 50, so that's half, so about 64. And now the high range here is basically the positive, how far you can go in the positive direction. And the full possible amount you could go would be 100%, which would be 127 steps. Of course, I'm already starting at 64, so 64 plus 127 is going to take me past the possible range of MIDI, so I'm going to find that only half of my strip controller is actually usable. I'm going to run along here and I'm going to reach 127 and I'm going to keep going, and that's not going to do anything. Same with the low. So the low is basically how much range I have in the negative direction that way, and it's the same thing again. So I've got it set to 50 here, so 50% of 127. We're already starting at 64, so it's got 64 to move in that direction. If I put that at 100%, I would move my hand down there, halfway it would get to 0, and then it would be trying to go to minus 64, but obviously the range of MIDI doesn't allow us to go to minus 64.
So the long of the short of it,
yeah.
What's the point?
What's the point? Okay, so this...
That maybe if you did show an example.
Okay, so the point of it is basically to set the higher and lower points of this thing. So there's... say I had this, Gert gave me a good example earlier, so say I had this connected to volume. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly create a control for volume in here. So I'm going to create this, I won't tell you too much about main stage, but I'm just creating a screen control, and I'm going to map that to this modulation wheel that I'm sending out on strip controller 1. So hopefully you can see now if I zoom in that as I move the strip controller, this knob is moving. Okay. Is it? Let's do that again. Okay, so I have this control, and now I'm going to very, very quickly map that to the volume of this ES2 patch. So it's just a pure wave, this thing, but I'm going to map that to the volume. So I click here and just map that to the volume. So now if I move my hand up and down, I'll zoom in on the volume control. If I move my hand down, you can see that I'm changing the volume. Okay, so now what would the point of these bounds be? Okay, so if I go to back to my window here, say that I wanted this to control volume. I want to control volume with the strip controller, but obviously volume's quite the sort of thing you don't want to get too wrong. You don't want to suddenly go really loud if you move your hand up and down here. And also you don't. Maybe I never want it to disappear. So I could say the lowest I ever want the volume to get to would be a quarter of this fader range. So what I would do is I set my bass. Okay, and normally I want it to be at 50%. I never want it to go below a quarter. Okay, so I'm already at 50%, so I can afford to go 1/4 down. So I set my low range to 25%. So that means I'm already at 50%, and my low range, so here's 0, my low range is 25%, so that would take me to here. And then I never want it to go above, say 60%. I don't ever want it to go above 60% volume. So then I'd set my high range to 10%. So we're starting off at 50% and we've got the 10% on top of that. So now, if I look here on my thing, you can see that I can go up, but eventually I'll never go above 60% of the full volume range. Can you actually see that moving?
Just about.
Just about, okay. It's not really because I've got to refresh it probably. Okay, so that is moving. And then if I go down, I never want it to go below 25%, and it's not at the moment because I've set my lower range to not take me fully to 0. And the scale factor, if I put the scale to 4, say, now let's have a look at this now. So now I can do that with very small movements on the keys, basically. That's very small movements on the strip controller, you can't really see it. So it's just about fine-tuning the controls. It's about saying, if you want to control, say you wanted to control the volume with the pressure of the keys, is another example Gert gave me. You could set it so like when you first touch it, it's always at least like 30%, so you can always hear a note, but then it's just setting the lower limit and setting the higher limit.
So how hard you press?
It's setting, depending on how hard you press, how high is the volume going to go and what's the minimum volume going to be.
Okay. What would be the appropriate setting for pitch bend with a 0 bass?
For pitch bend?
Yeah.
Okay, pitch bend is slightly different. We'll come on to that in a sec, though.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that. Let me just add a set bass to 50%. Okay, so I'll just quickly show you this invert thing. So now we know about the bounds, we can use this invert. So I'll put my scale factor. Can you make this full screen? Put my scale factor back to 1. Okay. Okay. Now I'll put my I'll click this invert button. You can see it goes red now, and it's at -1. So this is the same as we used to be able to do this just by dragging in the thing, but now obviously we've got more options now. Okay, so the invert button's pressed. And what I'll do is I'll put my low to 100%. So this is the default settings. Bass is 0, high you've got 100% range, and low you've got 100% range. But what this means, if it's not inverted, what this means is I can't go down, but I can start from 0 and go up. If I hit the invert button and put the bass at 100%. So now it's starting, its resting position is at the very top value, so it's sending out 127 by default. And now if I move my hand with the invert button pressed, if I move my hand in the direction that would have previously taken me upwards, it now starts at full and goes down instead. So the invert is just changing the direction of the movement of the strip controller. But you've got to change the bass to kind of make that do something sensible. Okay, now underneath that, we've got this always return to origin button. Origin.
Sorry, can the router be used to control what note values get sent out from the individual keys? In particular, can I reconfigure what the column of keys at the bottom of the Eigenharp send out? Is that
as in percussion keys? No, basically that's more to do with key groups and some
yes, the bottom keys. Yeah.
These ones, yeah, still unfortunately. Well, I mean, okay, yeah. So the percussion keys, they've got their own mode key. It's slightly. Okay. Maybe I could do this at the end, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. But yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so there's this always return to origin tick box as well. And what that means is, at the moment, if I move my hand along the strip controller and suddenly let go, it's not doing it at the moment, but it's got the potential to stay where it is, basically. Same with the yaw of the keys. If you let go before it's fully centered, the value will stay where it is. If I tick the always return to origin button, then it's always going to, as soon as you let go of the controller, it's always going to jump back to the base value. So that's actually how it behaves ordinarily in the past with the strip controllers and audio unit and VST plugins. When you let go of the strip controller, it always jumps back to the rest value or whatever you had the knob on the actual GUI set at. But this tick here, and it will always jump back to the base value, basically. Okay, and then we've got this control scope stuff here. This is to do with multi-channel MIDI stuff. I'm going to go on to that in just a second. Down here we've got something that's quite interesting as well. So we've got this resolution. So I'm sure, as you've all heard, or as you all know quite well, is that MIDI, you've got this 7-bit values you can send out. So you've got 0 to 127 are your options. What we can do is, instead of sending out 7-bit, we can utilize 2 MIDI CCs at once and combine them to get a 14-bit value, which is, instead of 0 to 127, you have 16,000, I think it's over 16,000 steps of resolution instead of 127. So basically it's pretty simple to sort that out. So you click the 14-bit thing here, and then you've got the option to choose which CC will be your second. It's called the least significant bit, or LSB. So you get to choose which CC pairs up with whichever one you have selected in the modulation matrix, or the routine matrix. And the one you have selected, the one you've ticked the box in the routine matrix, and this one I'm choosing now from the list, will combine to make this 14-bit data. I haven't actually been able to find, ES2 is supposed to support it, but I haven't, but ES2 is not doing what it says it should do. But if we look in MIDI monitor, I've ticked the 14-bit thing, and now you can see that can you make that full screen actually? Actually, before I do that, I'm going to put the scale right down so we can see what's going on. So I'm putting the scale to 0.1. So as I move my hand along, it changes slowly. Okay, so now you can see, as I move my hand along the strip controller, we've got this extra 33 now. So in between each step, so I was sending out on number 1 first of all, the modulation. You can see that between each step on the modulation, it cycles through the full 127 on number 33, which was the second one I chose. So using the combination of these two, some external programs and some synths accept this 14-bit data, so you get to have a 16,000 plus resolution from the Eigenharp keys sent out over MIDI. And I imagine especially people who are using things like Max MSP and building their own stuff could take really good advantage of that.